Hello. I want to share with you experience I had in elementary school. It was there were actually three experiences in the same class, and I'd like to share those with you because they made profound impacts on my life. I was in Ms. Norwood's class at Silas Mahome Elementary School, and the three things that happened made an impact. The first thing that happened to me is on the first day of class, she placed in front of me one of my classmates who I would become a very good friend of. His name was Bobby Williams, and Bobby had polio. And up until that time, I had never met anybody with polio. Oh, I'd seen people. You'd see people on the street, or you'd run into somebody and you knew that they had polio. But I'd never had any interaction with anybody. When I would see somebody like that, I'd kind of look the other way because I didn't know what to do or how to act. Well, Bobby and I became good friends, and he was really smart. And one day I asked him, I said, his arm was in a sling. He couldn't move his arm. And his right arm and his right leg, he had a brace and he could walk, but he had a tough time walking. And I asked him, I said, can I touch your arm? And he said, sure. So I touched his arm, and a bond formed between us, and he was one of the very first people that I knew that allowed me to see somebody with a disability as more than just a person with a disability, that they were just like me, only they had a disability. And that was the first thing that was so profound in my fourth grade experience. The second thing were the timetables. Now, Ms. Norwood, she was a stickler for timetables, and we had a list of the tables from 1 through 12, and she would start with 1. We did all the 1s, and then we did the 2s, and then we did the 3s, and we did that for the whole week. And then at the end, after we had gone through 12, we would have a test every Friday. And she would just say 3 times 6, 4 times 7, and just in that cadence. And people, the first probably 2 or 3 times she did that, people just freaked out. There were boys and girls that were crying. They didn't know how to do it. I mean, it was just so fast. But over the course of the school year, you learned, they just became second nature to you. And that really taught me that there's some things that need to be memorized. And they need to be memorized and to a point that they just become part of who you are. And that fourth grade math experience was one of the best that I ever had in math. The last thing I want to share with you is we back in those days, we celebrated Armistice Day, and we would have parades. Sometimes we would have the day off from school. There'd be parades downtown. We also celebrated Confederate Memorial Day. Now, I know you don't do that today. You couldn't do that, but in the South, that was a big deal. We did that. And one day, Mrs. Norwood got the president of the UDC, the United Daughters of the Confederacy, to come and address our class. And she talked about the Civil War, and it was really exciting because we just studied the Civil War. And she told us that there were 7 soldiers who fought in the Civil War who were still alive. And that just really freaked me. I couldn't believe that because we'd been studying the Civil War, and it was that there are 7 soldiers. It was like the Revolutionary War as far as I was concerned. There were 7 soldiers who were still alive. Now, obviously, these were old men, but who had gone through that. It was like living a part of history. And she went on to say that one of them had spoken with the big paper everybody used to look at in Georgia, or I say everybody, the people that I knew, was the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. We used to get that particularly every Sunday. There was a big article about that, and they interviewed one of the soldiers who was still alive, and he had fought at Gettysburg. And the part of the article asked him what he remembered when he was at the Battle of Gettysburg. And he said that he remembered there was so much smoke. I mean, there were times when you couldn't see anything. The smoke was just that intense. I guess it would come from the cannons and maybe from the rifles. And the other thing he said he remembered, he didn't say anything about dead soldiers, but he said there were so many dead mules and horses because they had carried, they carried the supplies and the cannons, and he said they were everywhere. And I read something not too many years ago that talked about that they, after the battle was over, there were so many dead animals that they had bonfires and it just burned for, seemed like forever. But one of the things that she told us that was very interesting, I thought, was that 50 years after the Civil War, they had a reunion. And the first thing you think of is a high school reunion or a college reunion. Well, they had a reunion. And soldiers from the Union and soldiers from the Confederacy were there. And she had several pictures. They weren't actual photographs, but they were in a magazine, and she showed us. And many of the soldiers were in their uniforms, and they had a mock battle where the Union soldiers lined up on one side and the Confederates on the other, and they started running towards each other as best they could, and they were yelling at each other, the article said. And then when they came to each other, they didn't have rifles, but when they came to each other, they embraced each other because of the comradeship of having fought together against one another on those several days at Gettysburg. You could tell when they had a picture and they were sitting around that the smiles on their faces, even there were some people who it looked like they were sad and there were tears in their eyes, I guess because they were overwhelmed with what they were experiencing. But these people had gone through so much together, even though they were on different sides, even though they were enemies. Now they were united. Now they were coming together. We're in the middle of an election. I don't have to tell you that. And people are divided. I don't think I've ever seen our country is more divided than it is right now. After this election is over, we need to do like those soldiers of the Confederacy and of the Union. And we need to come together, and we need to be united so that we can be one nation under God, indivisible, with the liberty and justice for all. God bless you.